Andrea has been a long time Sauk Prairiean, and her parents were involved, and she's involved, and just not only as a parent, but as a volunteer and someone who has worked tirelessly to make this community. So thank you, Andrea, for that. Cassie Gavel, wave Cassie. Cassie was my summer intern last year. She is a rising junior at Sauk Prairie High School and very involved, keeps her parents busy. So I thought she would be a great perspective as a student. And then I have one of my favorite educators from Sauk Prairie School District, Noelle Sapiro. Wave, Noelle. Noelle is the executive director of special education and pupil services within the district, and is just a wealth of knowledge. And probably 9 out of 10 conversations that I have with Noelle leads back to her talking about her child, me talking about my child, and just all the ways that we learn and grow together. So thank you, Noelle, for that. Can everyone see my screen and the slide that I have on deck? All right, thumbs up. There we go. So one of the things that data tells us and science tells us is regardless of the socioeconomic level of a family, when parents are involved, children are going to do better. They are healthier, they do better, have better grades, socially do better, problem solving strategies do better. And so we know that involvement is a good thing. And when we look at the success of a child, it starts in utero, day one, the involvement of those formative years. And it's not our teachers and our coaches and everyone else in society that's at fault. It's what did we give to that child? But that comes with a whole lot of pressure. My former job and this job, you know, we've got night meetings and sometimes meetings run long. It was always very important to me to be mom first. But what happens if you can't make something? What do kids think about? Well, we're going to get to that, but I thought let's look at the data and what does it say? 30 years of national achievement research shows a correlation about engagement and having a student perform higher in school. We know that education is beneficial to the overall family success unit, and sometimes you'll hear the term generational disadvantages. That's because if you've never had a parent involved or you've never had grandparents involved and it continues from generation to the next, you can almost predict the outcome there. So moving on from that, it's always interesting to me to talk to students, and I love the high school student because they're checking me out. I'm asking some very straightforward questions, but their responses are usually all over the place, but each response is enlightening in different perspectives as a parent. So I'm excited to get some of that. As we go through this though, you know, whether you're a helicopter parent or a parent that can't be at things, the opportunity today is to understand and hear from all sides and not carry guilt. I don't want anyone to feel like if they can't be at something, they're less than. Or if they choose to let their kids fly and fail, that's okay too. But just be open with your questions. Send me messages. I'll be monitoring that. And now I'm going to get to the important piece, and that is our guest. So here I am flying. Love you, love you, love you. I still end each call with I love you. Check in on them. Andrea, tell me I'm not alone. Will you own it? Self-proclaimed helicopter parent or no?
I will not claim to be a self-proclaimed helicopter parent. I walk a fine line. I feel like it's very important to be involved. But I also think I try to do a good job of giving them space to kind of navigate waters, and you know, it comes down to a lot of trust too. But so yeah, I mean, it is a fine line between being too much and not enough. But you know, I just do my best, I think, with every parent, trying to get a little of both.
Yep. And you've also been in environments, Andrea, that your bosses have very high expectations. And sometimes when you think you're going to be at something, you are told otherwise. How do you handle that?
Well, it kind of like, I just think back, like my parenting style, of course, is, patterned how you were raised. And, those that know my parents know they're ultimately like involved in everything. Growing up, I was a 12-season athlete, and I don't ever remember them not being at one of my games, which is crazy because they have 2 other kids too. And my brothers were also involved. And although at the time I didn't realize like how awesome it was for them to put the effort forth, but if they weren't able to make it, and I'm sure they weren't, I just don't ever remember, I didn't hold that against them. But yeah, there is expectations put forth by just my work environment and how I was raised. I mean, a quote that I still use is one that my dad uses, like, if you're going to do something, do it right. But that necessarily, sometimes isn't the best way, but I'm a perfectionist. So, expectations are high of myself and others. And the thing you have to separate is your expectations are just that. They're yours and they're for you. A lot of times you project them onto others, either my coworkers or, just anybody you associate yourself with, your friends, your family. So yeah, it's hard to kind of separate and, know that you're there and being supportive of your kids, but also not being too ridiculous that it causes some detriment.
I love that statement. Your expectations are just yours. I mean, that I literally got chills when you said that, because we forget that. And especially people who are high achievers and wanting to please everyone and be exceptional at everything. People outside that are looking at us, they probably don't even have expectations. We just are. We're in the moment. Can you touch on a little bit? I'm sure you had to do this over the years a little bit with Kurt Mueller when you worked for him. How did you talk about work-life balance and having to take a stand for your child in the workplace?
So, I mean, it's hard, I think sometimes too, with Kurt being male. I mean, sometimes the males, just kind of fall into the stereotype where they think they need to be the breadwinners, and sometimes the female or the mother role ends up being the nurturers and the ones more involved in the family life. And, Kurt was hard because he sacrificed a lot to come, develop Mueller Sports Medicine. And so he self-admitted wasn't around a lot of times. But I would have conversations with him, and to me, it was important. Like, this is a priority of mine, and this is something I don't want to miss. There's times that things came up, and of course, I understood that you need to be flexible and fluid too. But I would just state that this is important to me, and having work-life balance is key. He is one that, especially when I was pregnant with the kids, he kind of was, I mean, he was happy for me, but he also was like, oh no, he thought that was going to detract from me being a hard worker and being a pivotal member of the workforce at Mueller. But, it's a touchy subject, but you have to be an advocate for yourself and prioritize what you think is important. And hopefully you can get alignment from the people you work with and work for.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. In preparing for today's session, I was Googling what are interview questions one could ask of an employer that would give you a sense of what does work-life balance look like in the company. And one of them was, if you're ever interviewing with someone, to say, tell me about your benefits that support work-life balance. And I thought, what a beautiful question, and very easy and natural to ask of a potential company that you're going to be working for. So thank you with that. I'm curious as to how Cassie is going to respond to you, Andrea, and also me. But before we hear from Cassie, I found this video that I thought was very helpful, and so I wanted to share it with you, and all the different variations of what an engaged parent means to their high school students. So watch this.
Is there anybody here whose parents are not at all involved in his education?
Well, mine are not involved, but it's not a bad thing because of the language barrier. It's very hard for them to be engaged in my education. So I've had to take a very independent role when it comes to school, but I do have support from them.
Most of the time they're busy. And so, like you said, I have to take responsibility and be independent on my own.
Do you think that makes it harder for you?
Somewhat.
And for those of you whose folks are involved in PTA, they are involved in your extracurricular activities. How do you think that helps you?
Well, my mom pushes me to do my best because I like to get good grades, but sometimes if I'm feeling lazy, I'll be lazy, but my mom is the one that really keeps me straight.
You need to know what your kids doing at school. You need to know what kind of environment they're in, who their teachers are, so you can relate to what they're going through.
How much involvement is too much?
My mom actually used to go online. She used to go on every single blog of all my teachers. She used to go on the school website to see what the events were coming up. I felt kind of just invaded a bit.
My mother's actually worked at my school every year since I was in the 7th grade. She's always been there. It'll be times where I'll be in the classroom and she'll just walk around the hallway. She'll take a little look in, and then she'll tell me to come here.
You know, it's bad enough to get in trouble at school from your teacher. You sure don't want it from mom, too.
I know people whose parents actually work in there. They follow them in the halls. They talk to them. And then, like, if my friends are like, all right, that mom needs to give the kids some space.
You think it's worse at the middle school level or the high school level?
Definitely much worse than high school level. Yeah.
Well, I think it's great when parents are involved, but they have to realize that they need to let us spread our wings.
How do you think too much parental involvement could harm your education?
I mean, I know that there is a level of too much, but personally, I don't think that could ever harm you.
I've actually seen some of my friends whose parents are like really involved and they always want to know exactly what's going on. And it kind of just smothers them as an individual learner.
I think it hinders the students' ownership of their own education. It makes them think, oh, if I don't do this, then my parents are gonna know. If I, make a B or something lower than that, then oh no, my parents are gonna do something. It's not about I have to learn from my mistakes and move forward.
So Cassie, tell us.
Is there anybody here whose
Oh,
parents
sorry.
are
Wait a
not?
second. What do kids really think, Cassie? What if they can't be there? Let's start with that.
I mean, personally, this is a very differing issue from kid to kid. So personally, I understand that sometimes my mom might have a meeting for work or she might have to go to a Packer game and she needs time to focus on herself because she allows me that time too. Like if I don't want to sit and have family dinner because I'm feeling really exhausted, she'll allow me time to just be in my room and just take some time alone. And I think that as kids, we need to grant our parents that too, because it's kind of a two-way street.
Right. Have you ever heard of a teammate or a friend in show choir whose parents are always working? What do they say? Have they ever communicated their disappointment?
I mean, not really. I think they understand that sometimes work needs to come first, and that's just the way it is. And no one should feel bad about that, but
Right.
it's a very differing thing. And
Right. And I've noticed over the years that if there were teammates or students who didn't have a parent present, oftentimes other moms, dads will be very inclusive and treat them like they're their own. And is that okay in your opinion?
yeah, of course.
What do we really need as this generation of old people, and you're the up and coming generation, Cassie? What do you think is the most important thing for parents in the community to know about today's high schooler?
I mean, I think personally, again, this is all very one-sided, but personally, my mom she supports me, but I don't feel smothered. So I can't really speak on having a helicopter parent because she does allow me room to grow and to make my own mistakes and learn from them. But it's hard when she is there because it sort of feels like there's a pressure or an expectation that I have to meet because she's always she's very supportive and she's always watching, but it also just feels like a little bit of pressure because it's oh, my mom took off work to do this, or my mom's missing this to come watch me run. I better do a good job. And it's very hard to meet those expectations that you set for yourselves. And also, I feel like there's a little bit of pressure put on kids from parents. I was talking to one of my friends in cross country, and she was like, some of the parents are just so mean to their kids that it takes the fun out of sports, when sports should be about making friends and learning how to be a part of a team rather than winning championships and trophies and getting first in a race.
Oh.
So I think that that's an important distinction to make.
It is a very good distinction to make. I'm guilty of that, but like your mom, I'm very, very competitive, and we can't help it. Sometimes we just want the best, you know? But I can tell you, being the mom of a 23 and 20-year-old, that's probably the most vocal thing. They loved all the car rides of sports and having those one-on-one conversations and the support of being there and seeing new places. They do not miss one moment of the look I would give behind home plate, or the car ride of me telling them how they could have done better, or if we're going to go through all this trouble, why do we spend all this money if that's the best you can perform? And you don't realize that till you're on the side. And so all the kids going through that, it's tough. And parents learn every step of the way while they're raising parents. And I had to be taught by an educator at the high school that every kid learns differently. And so I want to introduce my friend, Noelle Sapiro. And Noelle is the Executive Director of Special Education and Pupil Services with Sauk Prairie School District. But more importantly, she is a engaged, informed mother with clear training in the subject that also still falls short sometimes. And that's okay. Noelle, what do we need to know as we take the next 5 minutes to apply some data and some real educators' perspective, and then allow enough time for some Q&A at the end? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's such a great topic, and we could talk for so long about this, right? But I think about, being a mom and being a mom of a child who has pretty intense anxiety. And it, she's now 25, but, it really impacted her in school. And I think having a mom at that time, I was an administrator in Madison Metropolitan School District, and Jordan was going to school there. And that I thought, she must think this is great. And she was like, Mom, don't acknowledge me if you see me at Memorial High School, because, I've got this. And so I was trying to think of how do you start on this topic? And then I went back and read your question, Tawana, and you asked, what do you wish you knew when your kids were young, and especially being in education? And I think one thing is, I don't know about all of you on screen here, moms and dads, at some point, the world helped us think that we have to be perfect in every way, shape, or form for our kids. That is such an unrealistic expectation of anybody, and perfect is a subjective term, of course, right? And so I was thinking about, if I could go back and do it over, I would be really honest and model imperfection for my child, and own it and talk about it. And while it's become cliche, some of my greatest learning, and I think with Jordan, some of her greatest learning has been when she's bombed something. I'm not encouraging that people try to fail, but it's okay if you do. And if you do it right, you're going to figure out a different strategy, or learn that you're meant to go in a different direction, right? And I think about a conversation I had with Jordan when she was done with school, and she said, you and Dad are great. You've always been there. So I'd say I was quasi helicopter mom, and she said, but you always tried to jump in and fix things for me. All I needed you to do was listen. And so that's the other important point is, when you're listening, I don't know if any of you are a Brene Brown fan. I totally am. And she said, when you're listening to your children, really listen. Don't be poised to respond or fix it. Just listen. Believe your kids. I'm saying students, but believe your kids. And even if you think they're not telling the truth, believe them at first, and then ask questions, but ask questions to help them learn that they can count on themselves to come up with some solutions. And I'm way oversimplifying that relationship. And, you know, the other thing I think I'd want to model for Jordan more, her dad owns his own company and I was an administrator in school. So she didn't see the me that struggled in high school and that had to work really hard in college and graduate school to kind of make up for struggling elsewhere. She just saw us as mom and dad who are doing okay. And I feel like what I'd want to model for her is asking for help. It's okay to ask for help. And I hope even within our school district that we can increase that culture within our district so that kids know I need help. I need help with my academics. I'm feeling really stressed. I'm feeling uncomfortable in a relationship. My personal opinion is that in our world, again, there's a standard of perfection, be it appearance or you've got the perfect job or you're making all this money. That's not true for anybody. Like you said, Tawana, we're all worried that we're not looking like other people or that they're judging us. In fact, other people are just worried about the same stuff in return, right? And so I think those are the big things. And I think just there's so much data about parent involvement, and Tawana, you hit on that. And when parents are involved, and then I would say also when parents and schools are connected and are a team, and that our kids see that we're a team and we're both trying to work together for their benefit. And that might not always mean agreeing with everything our kids want to do, right? But still saying, you might not agree with what mom and dad are saying and what school are saying, but we're coming at it from a place of love and we're trying to help you. I also think involving students as soon as they can in conversations that are about them, you know, so parent-teacher conferences, I love when students go with their families. We have IEP meetings for students with disabilities, and that's where we talk about programming for students. I love when students come to the meeting and that they're there and that they candidly share what they need us to know. That's so important. I feel like I'm really rabbit trailing because there's so much to talk about. Tawana, you had something on your first slide that when families feel unwelcome by school, it's a trigger and it can predict future dropout. And that will always pierce my heart because we want that family engagement. And, you know, I think it's important for all of us to know we might not always agree with each other. And, you know, sometimes people might not even like us, but if we can figure out a way to work together to support our kids, then they're also seeing that safety net. They're also seeing how to ask for help, school asking families for help, families asking school for help. They're also seeing us work through when we don't agree with one another, you know, but working for a common goal. So I can't encourage you enough to be involved, to ask questions of your children's teachers, of any of us. That's our job here. We love when parents reach out, and no, that's not only if they're reaching out to say kudos, you know, we can't solve a problem if we don't know about it. And so I appreciate when parents take the time to reach out and share their concerns. And it's a starting point, right? So I don't know, I feel like I could go on and on and on, but you know, I agree with so much that Cassie and Andrea have shared. And you know, for our kids to see that we're all humans having a human experience, and not every child has parents that can be at every game because they're working a couple jobs to support their child doing the things that they're doing. That's okay. Explain that to them and they'll still feel the love. And I think, again, sitting down with my own child, she takes in so much more than I think she takes in. And a lot of times I feel like if I'm not explicitly saying something to her, she won't know that I mean X, Y, or Z. She gets it. They absorb it. They know that you love them. And I think the last thing I would just encourage is for your kids. I've learned this as a mom, like to encourage Jordan, encourage your children to disagree with you, encourage respectful disagreement. But one of you said this, I've always wanted my child to have her life, not my life, or not the life of her grandmas and grandpas that are like, you should do X, Y, and Z. I just want her to have that. And I sometimes wonder, I didn't want to overwhelm with data, but I like having numbers on the screen in front of you, but just, I think sometimes our kids' lives are so overscheduled that there's no time for just unstructured time and play. And there was a book I read many, many moons ago, and it was called The Last Child in the Woods. And it talked about the move as technology became a thing. Kids were spending less time outdoors and creating and playing and having make-believe and exploring. And the author postulated that, that led to a decline in some creativity of kids and independence and autonomy and leadership. And worthwhile book, worth reading, even though it's old, but I think that's true. So.
Well, thank you, Noelle, for that. I know we're coming upon our time, and if you have to jump off, I want to respect that. These are meant to be just quick virtual snippets. But if anyone has a question, if you want to put it in the group chat, or if you just want to unmute yourself and ask, you are welcome to do so at this point in time. We'll just give a couple of minutes if anyone has anything. Michelle.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
How about that?
Yeah.
I took a few notes here, and I just wanted to add, I totally agree with everything that everybody was saying. In speaking on what was said, I totally agree. And it took me a long time to understand this as a father and a parent, that nothing is perfect. They'll never be perfect. So if we're all looking for something perfect, it's never going to happen. I feel like if our kids feel like they're looking for perfect, they're going to only find disappointment in that, because it's not there. A few things that I experienced was flat out, we learn from our mistakes. So when it was said that we try to let our kids fail, it's only because they'll learn from failure. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons in life, is to learn from mistakes that have been made. Men, fathers, we're fixers. It took me as a dad a long time to understand that I can't fix everything. I just can't. So the other role I took was just to be supportive and to be there when I'm needed and when I'm asked. Social media, to me, that's a root of a lot of causes. I'm sure everybody will agree, but it takes away that face-to-face contact. It takes the emotion out of any conversations that are had. I think our kids today are lacking a lot of that when they're face-to-face with people, that just to be able to sit and talk about anything. I mean, it's really something that I've noticed. And I guess the biggest thing at the end of the day is, in my opinion, what I've learned through my raising of my kids is that we have to be parents first. We can't be a friend to our children, really. I think we need to be the parent. I think the friendship comes as they get older down the road, but I think they so much, need us as parents. I thank you. This is a great conversation. I appreciate giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. One last question for anyone, and then we're gonna call it. Everyone good? Well, I want to thank my guests, Andrea, Cassie, and Noelle, and for each of you for taking the time to be with us today. I'll end it with the quote that you see in everyday life: encourage your children, and I'll add anyone, to believe in their own strengths, whether around their behavior, a sport, creativity, or whatever else you see, by praising and valuing them yourself. And I do think it's really easy to get caught up in the world of comparing yourself to others, or what is my child going to look like next to the other. Sally Sue said her child was volunteering for this. Mine hasn't volunteered for any. Just let your child be. They will evolve at their own rate. We've learned today that failure is good. Sometimes it's easier to do than others to stand and watch, but it's a part of the process. And so I appreciate everyone being here today. I look forward to the next Chamber Connect. Thank you, Bridget, for joining us. You can follow the Salt Prairie Chamber of Commerce page to learn about upcoming sessions, or visit saltprairie.com, and we do hold these monthly, and you'll see the comments throughout. So thanks, everyone. Make it a great day, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yep.